1874, women in America who were married to alcoholic men formed a group called the Women's Christian Temperance Union to protest for the prohibition of alcohol, which eventually made it illegal to have in your possession or to consume in public. Consuming alcohol used to be so regular before these times that doctors would prescribe it to people if they were complaining about illness, like a headache. Nobody ever suspected that alcohol was dangerous or harmful or even being overconsumed. Well, I guess they didn't know that it was pretty harmful, but they didn't really care. It was considered so safe that people recommended giving it to their children, which today is obviously seen as completely insane. Modern drug prohibition began in the early 20th century. After alcohol was prohibited in the US, other countries began banning things like cocaine, opium, cannabis, all that stuff. This made it completely illegal to sell or own the banned drugs, and if you were caught, you were jailed. If you were caught, not even a prescription was acceptable. Richard Nixon began the modern war on drugs in 1971 because he believed it was one of the biggest problems in America, which would eventually lead to the restriction and ban of many drugs. Then, in 1972, Nixon launched a secret operation where he sent 5 burglars to plant listening devices and steal documents from the Watergate complex. They were caught, but the White House denied any relation or any links to the crime at all. If countries were becoming so strict on drugs and making them illegal to access, then why did crime rates get higher? That was the exact problem. They tried to send a message that didn't get received by changing something accepted into unacceptable. They assumed that changing the legality of the drug would use... What the hell? What am I writing? They assumed that changing the legality of drugs... Oh my god. They assumed that changing the legality of drug use would force people to stop using it. But the real logic is that reducing the supply and the availability of the drugs would just cause the price to go up. Instead, people kept going, nothing changed. But since the law was now different, they were committing crimes by just doing what they usually do. Since drugs used to be legal, now illegal, you are attracting criminals and basically making them have no choice but to resort to sometimes violent crime in order to sell or trade drugs. Criminals originally did things like rob banks and steal cars, which earned a lot of hate. Reasonable? But since selling drugs is a new crime, and a lot of people like drugs, criminals are now respected because of how they give you what you want instead of just stealing stuff. People say legalizing drugs isn't the answer, and maybe it isn't, but it would make much more sense to have people trading drugs without having to be violent and resorting back to stealing cars, because at least if criminals go back to stealing stuff, society remembers to hate them. We hate criminals. But selling drugs makes people love criminals because at least everyone is getting drugs and money out of it. What do you get out of your car being stolen? The crime rate spiked because people were finding illegal ways to sell and buy drugs. Now that it was much harder to obtain drugs legally, things like murder and stealing had to be involved if you wanted to sell heaps of drugs, which was originally a problem. Which wasn't originally a problem when it was legal. This doesn't mean drugs being legal is necessarily a good thing. This just means that you need to ban something the right way. Making drugs illegal didn't really fix much, it just created a bigger problem. People don't stop selling and consuming drugs, they just became really sneaky about it. And this doesn't work, because not only did they create a crime that everybody's already committing, but now it's harder to catch people who do it because they know it's illegal. Today, prescriptions of cannabis and other certain drugs are legal in some countries, but public unpermitted use of any other drug is completely illegal, obviously. The effects of overusing drugs like alcohol are expressed widely. making their consumption of legal drugs not illegal, but the effects of overusing them widely disliked by the people around you. What's more powerful than the law is how society judges something compared to how you see or use it. Making drugs illegal might make people see how dangerous it is after using it as much as they want, maybe pushing themselves to quit. But making it illegal makes it seem like something special and risky. Maybe making it hard to get openly makes people curious to try it. It's the same psychology of not letting a child see what's in a cupboard. If you hide it from them and tell them it'll get them in trouble, they'll still try to find out. But if you let them see, maybe they'll lose interest because they already know what it is.